And I'd never seen anything like that before. And so I called everybody over, and everybody, went and looked at it. And I took a photograph of it. And then we all just completely forgot about it. And we went and did our investigation. And on our 4-hour ride home, I was reviewing my notes, and I said, "Hey, does anybody remember anything about this white milky substance?" Nobody had any remembrance of it. It was as if all of us just went on autopilot and like unconsciously went about doing what we were doing without actually, being present, focused consciousness, with your consciousness, focused. And, and so that's an unusual thing. I've been in one particular circle where there was one spot in the circle that if you walked into it, it was an immense instant migraine. But you got out of
Really?
that spot and it would just disappear.
Oh my
So
God.
there can be a whole range of effects as you're walking around in them.
Jeff, are the symptoms that people experience, are they similar to what you might experience with high EMF fields?
Sometimes, but sometimes the range of effects is wider than that. Lucy Pringle has documented an enormously wide range of effects. One of the things that I've seen in the historical reports, for the most part in the United States, is there have been people and animals caught inside crop circles as they formed. And
Really?
it's usually not pretty, particularly with animals. I personally investigated a particular crop circle in southern Ohio, along the Ohio River near a little town called Moscow, Ohio, which is kind of outside of Cincinnati. And that particular crop circle, there had been a deer that had been caught in it, and it was just obliterated. I mean, parts of this thing was all over the place. I have seen reports in the historical cases of, where there was a deer that was half caught in the area of the circle, and it was like severed, where one half of it was outside the circle and one half of it was inside the circle, and was just completely severed. Dogs, with all the hair burned off of their, bodies that had been caught in circles. Now, there have been 2 cases, both in Florida, both back in the 1950s, in which there was an individual caught inside or adjacent to where a circle happened. One was a Project Blue Book case, in which there was this guy that was driving home a group of scouts from a scout meeting. He was like a 22-year-old retired Marine or whatever. And they saw what they thought was like headlights from a car that had gone off into the Everglades. And so he stopped their Jeep, and he grabbed a flashlight. This was at night, and said, "Hey, I'm going to go and check this out and see if I can, rescue whoever went off the road. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, go up to the nearby farmhouse and tell them to call the police." Well, the boys who were staying in the Jeep said that this guy went off into the glades. They saw his flashlight going for a while, and then all of a sudden they said they saw this giant red ball of light, and then the flashlight went out. And so they went up to go call the sheriff at the nearby farmhouse. The sheriff arrived, went out there, and they found this guy blacked out adjacent to this flattened circle in the glades. And he had radiation burns on his body. He was taken to a local Air Force hospital for treatment. He had burn marks on his hat. Project Blue Book investigators went out there and took all kinds of grass samples and soil samples, sent that stuff to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for analysis. And of course, not much has been reported on it, but the scientists at Wright-Patterson said that the samples that were taken by whoever the investigators were, they said that the roots of the plants were charred. And they couldn't figure out how that happened. Like the plants above the ground seemed to be fine, but the roots were completely charred on these plants that were flattened down. So you get a whole range of effects that can happen. And this guy was, of course, immediately, accused of hoaxing the thing. The media went on a big rant and they tried to discredit him. And but when you have those kinds of physical effects, and you can go onto the Project Blue Book archives and you can see, the burn marks in his hat and the photos of the radiation burns on this guy. Like, I don't know why you would want to try to hoax that, try to hoax your own radiation burns, but
Wow. Yeah. So speaking of hoax, what percentage, just a ballpark idea of what percentages do you think there are hoaxes of these crop circles?
So that depends on the region around the world you're in. I think they have a serious hoaxing problem in England. My wife and I went there one time back in 2007. I was there for a little over 2 weeks. I saw 10 crop circles reported. On that day, we were in those circles almost immediately after they were reported. And every single circle, all of them that I visited were man-made, every single one.
Oh, that's discouraging.
Here in the United States, I can tell you that 1 out of every 5 crop circles that we've looked at has been man-made. 1 out of every 5 crop circles we can confirm to be not man-made. And then the other, sort of 60%, we just don't get there early enough, or we don't have enough information collected to make a determination.
I'm so glad that you stick to that rigid way of reporting them. Instead of,
I don't want to report any false information to anybody.
Yeah, that's good. That's very honorable. Wow. So what is your best guess on how these things are happening? Is it possible it's some type of natural phenomenon? I know that sounds weird, but
I do. I've looked at, so many different hypotheses over the years. The first thing I will tell you is that if anybody tells you that they know how crop circles are being made, they're just lying to you.
Yeah.
Because there is not enough information that's been collected to confirm anybody's hypothesis. Mm-hmm. But there are hypotheses out there that do pose, a natural phenomenon effect. And maybe some crop circles are being made that way. Maybe there are some crop circles that are being made by UFOs. There are obviously ones that seem to be associated with certain kinds of balls of light. I can tell you that in the last sort of major investigation in the United States that occurred, just so that your audience is aware, the one that Samantha is investigating in 2013 is the last crop circle that has been reported in the United States. Really? There hasn't been a crop circle. In fact, because this was a historical case for her, really that didn't make it out to the wider public, and so that crop circle wasn't really widely reported. The last one that I personally investigated was in 2012. And that was an enormous crop circle, probably one of the largest ever in the United States. It was outside of the town of Chillicothe, Ohio. There were 47 circles and rings in a maize field. And the person who lived closest to where the crop circle occurred, he reported being awoken about 3:30 in the morning by this really unusual sound. And he did not have line of sight to where the crop circle was, but he heard this particular sound that he said descended from high up in the sky and then got more intense as it came down to the ground and then eventually dissipated. I played him a whole range of sounds, and one particular one that he said, that's it, that's the one I heard, that's the sound I listened to, was of a whistler. I don't know if you're familiar with whistlers, but they were discovered by ham radio operators. That what happens is when thunderstorms occur in the southern hemisphere, oftentimes some of that electrical plasma goes up above the cloud instead of down to the ground, and that happens
like
also in the northern hemisphere. But the energy gets trapped in the Earth's magnetic field, and it starts to bounce from the South Pole to the North Pole and back and forth. But sometimes this energy can come down at lower latitudes. And there's a project at Stanford University where they have been recording these whistler sounds. There was a guy back in the early 1990s that he was a scientist from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory who his hypothesis was that crop circles were being made by whistlers, that this energy was coming down from the ionosphere along magnetic field lines and hitting the ground. And that's what the energy was that was causing crop circles to occur. The fact that this guy actually heard the same sound as what a whistler makes prior to this huge crop circle appearing in this field adjacent to his house makes you wonder whether or not that connection really is there.
How loud are those whistlers?
What's that?
How loud are those whistlers?
So it depends on the intensity of the energy that's bouncing back and forth along the magnetic field lines and what latitude you're at. But you can hear them. You can go out to the Stanford's page that studies this, and they have a whole bunch of recordings of these that they just stick a microphone out and they've recorded them. Ham radio operators record them, or at least hear them quite often. They know the frequencies that they're at and so on and so forth. There are a couple of good scientific books about whistlers that you can kind of look up.
I ask because the Great Barrington crop circle, which is a 1995 crop circle, when I pulled the police records for the week prior to the article that went out on August 4th, the crop circle seems to have appeared August 1st. And just before that, in the wee hours of the morning, there are reports of a loud noise that come into the PD. And there is a description by a woman of markings made in her lawn, and she felt an overwhelming sense that she was going to be harmed. The police couldn't find any evidence of somebody attempting to harm her. They didn't know what the markings were. And 0.7 miles away, you get the big crop circle that appears along the Green River on the same stretch of road that the field of oats that that crop circle appears in is right adjacent to her property. So I just found that a little bit curious.
Yeah, see, I always try to document all of those kinds of details because over time you start to see these sort of similarities between cases, historical cases.